When you see an animal in trouble, what's your first instinct? It's to help, right? To swoop in, to move it somewhere safe. But what if that rescue, that simple act of moving an animal, is actually a huge gamble? In this explainer, we're asking a pretty tough question. Is our instinct to rescue always the right move? And to answer that, we have to start with a story you might not be expecting. Turn on the news, scroll through your feed. It feels like we're just surrounded by these heartbreaking stories of species on the brink. It's this constant, sad drumbeat, this story of loss. So yeah, you'd be totally forgiven for thinking that's the only story out there. But it's not. In some parts of the world, something else has been happening. Quietly and against all the odds, something kind of miraculous, actually, has been taking place. They're calling it the Great Animal Return. Across Europe and North America, decades of really hard conservation work are paying off in a huge way. We're talking about an absolutely astonishing comeback for some of our largest, most iconic species. And when you look at the numbers, the sheer scale of this recovery is it's staggering. Let's just take Sweden, for example. Back in the mid-1800s, red deer and roe deer were down to less than 100 animals each. Today, we're talking 25,000 red deer and 1 million roe deer. 1 million. And this one really gets me. The wild boar. It was completely extinct in Sweden. Gone. And now, there are around 300,000 of them. This isn't just a small bounce back, it's a massive success story. So this is amazing news, right? But this incredible success story on the big picture level creates a brand new and really complex problem. Because while these populations are recovering, individual animals are constantly getting pushed around by our world, whether it's from new construction or the illegal wildlife trade. So what do we do with them? And this image, this right here, is that dilemma in action. We see rescuers carefully moving a single gibbon. This single moment, this choice, it happens thousands and thousands of times, every single year, all over the world. Each one is a life we're trying to save, but it's also a decision with potentially huge consequences. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, think about this number, 250,000. That's how many wild animals end up in rehab centers in the US alone, every single year. That's an enormous number of animals caught up in the middle of our world. Okay, so let's get our terms straight. The official term experts use from the IUCN is a displaced organism. And that's basically any living thing, we're talking animals, plants, even fungus, that's been uprooted because of something we humans did, whether it's saved from poachers, pushed out by a new highway, or just picked up by someone who meant well. Okay, and this is where things get really, really tricky. See, moving these animals, the technical term is translocation, it seems so obvious, right? It feels like the compassionate thing to do, but it is absolutely loaded with hidden dangers. First up, disease. You could have an animal that looks perfectly healthy, but it might be carrying some kind of bug, a pathogen, that it's immune to. You release it, and that bug could just rip through a wild population that has zero immunity. It's kind of like a biological time bomb. All right, then there's genetics. This is a big one. You release an animal into a group it's not related to, and you can cause all sorts of problems. It could water down the local gene pool, wiping out special traits that help those animals survive there for generations. Or it could introduce bad genes, making the whole population weaker in the long run. Next, you've got to think about behavior. Think about it. An animal that grew up in captivity, does it know how to find food? Does it know how to hide from predators? Probably not. A release could be a death sentence. And you're not just dropping it into an empty space. You could be totally disrupting the social scene of the animals already living there. And finally, and this is a tough one, we have to think about the welfare of the animal we're trying to save. Just imagine the stress, getting caught, handled, stuck in a truck, and then dumped somewhere totally unfamiliar. The very act of rescuing can cause incredible suffering. So with all these massive risks, how on earth do the experts decide what to do? Well, they have a guiding rule, and it's called the precautionary principle. The IUCN puts it perfectly. Where there is uncertainty about the risks of a translocation, it should be assumed to present high risks. Basically, when in doubt, you have to assume the worst-case scenario. Caution is the name of the game. So what's the difference between doing it right and doing it wrong? It really boils down to this. On one hand, you have a responsible translocation. It's cautious, it puts the health of the whole ecosystem first, and it does everything possible for the individual animal. On the other hand, an irresponsible move is just a roll of the dice. It ignores all those potential ripple effects and skips the crucial screening steps. It's a huge gamble, not just for wildlife, but for us too. Okay, so we're wired to want to help, but we now know the risks are huge. So what does a responsible path forward even look like? Well, thankfully, there's a kind of ethical checklist to guide these incredibly difficult life or death decisions. So yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? How do we get this right? How do you balance that gut feeling, that need to save the one animal right in front of you, with the massive responsibility to protect the entire system? Well, this framework is the roadmap. First, you have to analyze the situation, and I mean really analyze it with no bias. Then, and this is key, you have to weigh all the options. Is moving the animal the only choice? What happens if we just do nothing? Then you define your goal, and only then do you get to the most critical part, weighing the risks against the benefits. If and only if the move makes sense, you pick the most humane method possible. And finally, you gotta have some humility. You have to be willing to learn and adapt, because mistakes will happen, and the stakes are just too high to be stubborn. And all of this brings us back to one huge final question. We're living in what scientists call the Anthropocene, right? The age of humans. And every time we choose to move an animal, we're wielding this incredible power. It forces us to ask, what is our ultimate responsibility here? Is it to save every single individual animal we find in trouble? Or is it to protect the vast, complicated, wild systems that allow all life to thrive in the first place? There is absolutely no easy answer to that, but it's a question we all have to keep asking.